guy is sitting in a bar. A beautiful woman walks in. She's in knockout, and he can't take his eyes off her. She notices him and smiles. She sashays over and sits beside him. She looks into his eye and tells him, "For $200, I'll do anything you want." He's astounded. "Anything?" he asks her. "Yes, anything," she replies. He takes out his wallet and slaps $200 on the bar. "Here's $200. Paid my house." Three nuns were talking. The first nun says, "I was cleaning in Father's room the other day, and do you know what I found? A bunch of pornographic magazines." "What did you do?" the other nuns asked. "Well, of course I threw them in the trash." The second nun says, "Well, I can top that. I was in Father's room putting away laundry and I found a bunch of "Oh my!" gasped the other nuns. "What did you do?" "I poked holes in all of them," she replied. The third nun suddenly fainted. Two blondes were facing each other with a lake between them. The first blonde wants to get to the other side, so she yells to the other blonde, "Hey, I want to get to the other side of the lake, but I can swim. Please tell me how you did this." The second blonde then says, "But you are on the other side." Women friends had gone out for a girls' night out and had been decidedly overenthusiastic on cocktails. Incredibly drunk and walking home, they suddenly realized they both needed to pee. They were very near a graveyard and one of them suggested they do their business behind a headstone or something. The first woman had nothing to wipe with, so she took off her panties, used them and threw them away. Her friend, however, was wearing an expensive underwear set and didn't want to ruin hers, but was lucky enough to salvage a large ribbon from a wreath that was on a grave and proceeded to wipe herself with it. After finishing, they made their way home. The next day, the first woman's husband called the other husband and said, "These damn girls' night outs have got to stop. My wife came home last night without her panties." "That's nothing," said the other. "Mine came back with a sympathy card stuck between the cheeks of her butt that said, 'From all of us at the fire station, we will never forget you.'" A man goes into a greasy spoon restaurant and orders a bowl of chicken soup. "What's this?" he screams. "There's a pubic hair in my soup. I'm not paying for it," and he storms out. The waitress gets very upset at this, follows him out and sees him go into the across the street. He pays the madam and retires to a room with a lovely blonde and goes down on her with gusto. The waitress bursts in and yells, "You complain about a hair in your soup and then come over here and do this?" He lifts his head, turns to her and says, "Yeah, and if I find a noodle in here, I'm not paying for it either." In a mental institution, a nurse walks into a room and sees a patient acting like he's driving a car. The nurse asks him, "Charlie, what are you doing?" Charlie replies, "Driving to Chicago." The nurse wishes him a good trip and leaves the room. The next day, the nurse enters Charlie's room just as he stops driving his imaginary car and asks, "Well, Charlie, how you doing?" Charlie says, "I just got into Chicago." "Great," replies the nurse. The nurse leaves Charlie's room and goes across the hall into Bob's room and finds Bob sitting on his bed furiously masturbating. Shocked, she asks, "Bob, what are you doing?" Bob says, "I'm doing Charlie's wife while he's in Chicago." Two old retirees were talking about naughty acts in a cafe. When they finished, the two retirees pay their bill and leave the cafe. A young man sitting next to them has overheard the conversation and smiles to himself, thinking it would be quite amusing to see two old retirees going at it. He gets up and follows them. Sure enough, he sees the two old retirees near the factory. The little old lady pulls off her panties and lifts up her dress. The old man pulls down his pants and grabs the lady's hips, and the little old lady then reaches for the fence. Well, what follows is 40 minutes of the most athletic the man has ever seen. The little old man is banging away at the little old woman at a pace that only can be described as phenomenal. Limbs are flying everywhere, the movement is a blur, and they do not stop for a single round. Finally, they collapse and don't move for an hour. The man is stunned. Never in his life has he ever seen anything that equates to this. Not in the movies. Not from his friends. Not from his own experiences. Reflecting on what he has just seen, he says to himself, I have to know his secret. If only I could like that now, let alone in 50 years' time. The two old retirees have by this time recovered and dressed themselves. Gathering the courage, he approaches the older man. He says, Sir, in all my life I have never seen anybody like that, particularly at your age. What's your secret? Could you like that 50 years ago? The retiree replies, Son, 50 years ago that fence wasn't electric. A guy goes to the post office to interview for a job. The interviewer asked him, Are you a veteran? The guy says, Why yes, in fact. I served 2 years in Vietnam. Good, says the interviewer. That counts in your favor. Do you have any service-related disabilities? The guy says, in fact, I am 100% disabled. During a battle, an explosion removed my private parts, so they declared me disabled. It doesn't affect my ability to work though. Sorry to hear about the damage, but I have some good news for you. I can hire you right now. Our work hours are 8 to 4. Come on in about 10 and we'll get you started. The guy says, if working hours are from 8 to 4, why do you want me to come at 10? Well, here at the post office, we don't do anything but sit around and scratch our butts for the first 2 hours. We don't need you here for that. Two young boys, both from well-to-do families, were talking. The first boy says, Our new French maid is a robot. The second boy replies, A robot? Maids aren't robots. The first boy again says, But ours is. I overheard my dad telling one of his golf buddies that he s***s her ass off every Saturday.